The Evermore podcast is now sponsored by WFST Total Compliance. WFST provides fire safety requirements UK-wide to prepare you and your employees should the worst happen. Do what you do best and visit wfst.co.uk today. Enjoy the episode. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Evermore YouTube channel. It's Monday night, and what's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. I'm back, as you can clearly see, but this time Marcus decided to bugger off, and we have the pleasure of Mr. Daniel Wales' company again this evening. Mr. Wales, how are you? What's going on, buddy lad?
That's 2 weeks in a row for me. I don't know,
No. I'm just amazed I managed to pin you down in your busy jet-setting journalistic lifestyle.
I know, actually, you know what? I thought last week when Mark said, "Oh, can you come on this week again?" I thought, you know what? Why not? Yeah, I enjoyed it last week with Mark, so I thought, I'll sample a bit of Chris this time.
Absolutely, mate. Well, everyone likes a curry on a Monday night, mate. That's what I'll say. Get spice things up, mate. Spice things up. The dad jokes are here already. But,
how many times did that work in nightclubs in the 90s?
Too many, mate. Too many. I don't want to repeat that on a live, mate. I'll get myself in trouble. But no. To be fair, it's nice to have a little bit of a smile because we certainly weren't smiling yesterday, mate, which we're about to get stuck into in a matter of moments. But just before we do have some very exciting news to talk about. We're going to start off on a nice positive note. But before I get to that, just a little reminder, as I always do, if you're new to the channel, you just checked us out for the first time, why not consider subscribing? We are over 5,000 subscribers now, which is what we'll talk about in a minute. So smash that button if you guys want to join us. Loads of room for you here and Evermore. Loads of content. You've got this show every Monday at 10 p.m. and pop-up videos left, right, and centre. Normally happy videos about Newcastle, but sadly, over the last couple of days, I probably haven't been very happy. But we'll get back to the happiness very soon. And we are live tonight. We've got loads of you in the comments as well. Smashing the comments in. Good to see so many of you in early doors. We've got Ian Brownlee in there. Oh, I just got rid of all the comments there for some reason. Ian Brownlee or Unai Emery, as he likes to be called there. Good evening. And George is saying, indeed, a bad evening. Absolutely, George. Well, I'll tell you what, before we get into all the miserable bad news, we're going to kick off with a nice little surprise here. So this is our 5K giveaway. We promised this when we got to a 5K subscriber mark. We were going to give away this belter prize right here, which is obviously the great Alan Shearer and a signed photograph of his last ever competitive goal for Newcastle United against the Mackhams. Of course it was. As taken in my boot. Yes, that is an Aldi bag next to Alan Shearer, as you always see there on the right-hand side. But we are going to give that away, and we're going to do the super-duper random selector prize draw now. Mark has left this in my capable hands. He is the technical support, but he's not here this week. So here we go. I think we should be there, Dan. We should, hopefully.
I've been looking forward to this since you first told me about it, Chris.
You'd be looking forward to it.
I've been looking forward to this random name sticker.
Okay, so we are going
to
pick a random name. Okay, so here we go. Smashing the button now. This is for the 5K giveaway. Good luck to everybody who's entered the prize. I'm going to smash this button right now, and the random winner is that NGNY Bowyer 9264. So I'm not sure which one of you guys is that sign-in or YouTube sign-in. Congratulations, you've won the Alan Shearer 5K prize. If you are watching tonight, let us know in the comments. Drop us a DM on X, as it's called now, or drop us an email. I think it's just evermorenufc@gmail.com. Let us know your details, and we will make sure we can deliver that great prize right out to you. So congratulations to the winner of the prize. So that's the good bit out of the way, Dan.
And now to the misery.
And now to the misery of yesterday's game against the shitbags that are Liverpool FC. Do you know what? I never used to hate Liverpool as much, and I've been supporting Newcastle a long time. Sadly, longer than you, mate, because I'm older than you. But I never used to hate Liverpool as much as I hate them now. And I think a large reason of it is because their manager is he's such a monumental wank, isn't he? I just can't bear the bloke. I mean, he was even having to go with his own fans for singing the other week, man. I mean, what is this guy all about, Dan?
It's a strange one with Jurgen Klopp, because I remember when he first came to the Premier League, I think there was quite a general consensus that he was a breath of fresh air. People actually really quite liked him, sort of his quirky personality. He was a bit different to the sort of norm that we had in the Premier League of the sort of, your Sam Allardyce's, your Mark Hughes, your Tony Pulis. It was something a bit different. And, I'll put my hands up. I thought it was quite a good thing. And I thought, yeah, this is new. This is nice. But all of a sudden, he's turned, as you quite, I won't use the same expletives that you use, but he turned into some just
Go on, Dan. You can swear in this show. Don't worry, mate. You're in a safe place.
I'm gonna say,
Trying to be all nice.
Right arse, to be honest, hasn't he? I mean, it's just this constant whinging and sort of wanting to blame anyone or anything else except for him and his decisions. I think is quite the sort of main part of it. To be honest, he's sort of always devoid of blame. It's always someone else's fault or someone else is doing something wrong, and he's the victim in all this, and everything else is like rubbish. I don't know. It's really repetitive. It's really annoying, and it just comes off like sort of a spoiled child who thinks he deserves the world, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. He has a real way of just really pissing everybody off, I think, really, mate. But sadly, we gave the prick as much ammunition as he possibly wanted to smile that horrible big Turkish teeth grin of his all around St James's Park. I think they turned the lights off, and you could still see that prick smiling in the centre circle, I think, because it was shining like a beacon in the night. So the tagline there, Dan, is how did we lose? And Eddie's come in for a bit of flack on this. Now, I'm curious to get your take on this, mate, because you are normally, despite your younger years in the podcast squad, you are normally the voice of reason with those crazy, cantankerous old bastards.
I do try to be sort of the voice of calm reason and wisdom at times.
You do. You've got Captain Shitty Pants and Lee. You've got Di, who's quite negative at times and apologizes for it before he does it. PK can go one way or the other. Mark's very similar to you. He always tries to see the good side of things, and then you normally come in and say, "Hey, everybody, just calm down, take your pills, stop shouting. Let's think about this."
But like Q and Trippier, when he's when everything's been a little bit frantic in a game, you're just like, just
less tattoos.
Yeah, well, I don't have any tattoos, just to put that one out there.
Me neither, mate. I'm sure everyone in the comments has tattoos. I keep making a joke to my daughter that I'm going to be like the white tiger in the care homes, where everybody from my generation is going to have busts in their clone lips just dragging on the floor and having to roll up like skin to find Chinese writing. And I'll have nothing. I'll be a blank.
Yeah, you'll be as fresh as a daisy, Chris, in your later years.
Exactly. But going back to the shitness that was Sunday, mate. Is Eddie culpable, and does he deserve to take the blame that he's taking?
Yes, I think so. I mean, last week against Manchester City, I criticised Bruno. Now, I know obviously the whole thing with the Twitter and NFC 360 happened in that week as well. But I honestly think he actually was warranting some criticism. I think a few of them were. And I don't think it's not saying we have to single them out and like sort of go on a massive pile-on. But I think criticism, when criticism is needed, is a good thing, because that's what helps teams grow. And I think if everyone just has those rose-tinted glasses of, oh, but look where we were 12 months ago sort of thing, then we'll never progress. Because you've got to think, well, yes, things have improved so much, but you've got to keep improving. And when you've got to also then call a spade. And if someone had a bad game, you tell them they had a bad game, and then they learn from that. As opposed to just, saying, oh, it's all right. And I know things like it will be okay, and we're in a very good position, and I think Newcastle will continue to get better week in, week out. But sometimes you have to criticise, and without criticism, then what is the world sort of thing. You can't just continue to pretend everything's sunshine and roses all the time. So yeah, I think Eddie got it a bit wrong yesterday. Not tactically, because tactically for the most part, Newcastle were really good and played Liverpool off the park for 75 minutes. Substitutions, he got those wrong, in my opinion. Gordon and Tonali being the main two. I know it's probably obviously everyone's been saying it, but it's right. Gordon was having Trent Alexander-Arnold's left and the left-hand side. Sorry. Obviously, Alexander-Arnold, whether he should have been on the pitch is probably a different matter, and probably shouldn't have been on the pitch, to be honest.
Shouldn't have been for me, Dan, after that.
No, I've watched
the ref bottled
it. He shouldn't have been on the pitch. So realistically, Liverpool should have been down to 9 men. But that's by the by. They weren't. He was still having his life. He was getting past him. He was putting dangerous balls into the box. He was getting shots away as well. Tonali in the midfield was sort of breaking everything down. He was getting it onto the ball, just keeping it moving and putting in good tackles where he needed to do so. And then when they went off, Longstaff looked a bit lost. He looked a bit lost against Man City as well. I know he's just come back from this.
He's not fit.
Yeah, it's this injury he's come back from. I don't think he's quite ready yet. Barnes was a bit quiet. I mean, you can't. The thing is, though, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier, a journalist friend, Chris Woff, in fact.
Right.
And he
picked that name up there, Dan. You're dropping all these journalist names. You love dropping journalist names.
But you can sort of understand why Howe made the substitutions, but perhaps at the same time it didn't have to make all three at once. I think is like it sort of shifted it too much because of course he made these substitutions against Aston Villa. He brought on Wilson for Isak, and he brought on Barnes for Gordon, and they both went and scored. Didn't happen this time, but it worked. So he's thinking that same way, but perhaps spacing out a little bit. And when you see how well Gordon was playing in that scenario, is it right to take him off because he was the main threat, he was the main danger man, whereas Villa at that point was sort of, that the heads were dropping. Liverpool probably at that point thought they were still in the game, so why change things? It's a bit like Pep with Man City last week. He played that full 11 for the full game. It was working, so he didn't want to change it. So you got to think at times it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because obviously Howe did it against Villa, it worked. Did it against Liverpool, it didn't work. But I think in that scenario, you got to look how well Gordon and Tonali were playing and whether it was right to take them off at that point when Liverpool still had something to fight back. They still had a little bit of hope. So I think not at that point.
I think it's easy for us to forget. I mean, Howe's still a young manager as well in many ways. You know what I mean? This is the biggest job he's ever had. No disrespect to Bournemouth, but he went away and he learned a lot, didn't he? After his Bournemouth experience, and he came back a much better manager. And a lot of people, I think, have been a little bit OTT with. I mean, all these shouts for Howe out and all this stuff is just
ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It's pathetic.
But it's not as if. Sorry, just to interrupt. It's not as if like Pep Guardiola's never made mistakes before.
No, exactly.
Like he's made substitutions that haven't worked out in the Champions League or whatever, and it's cost Man City the game and the tie. It's an awful game that we don't really want to have to think about. Criticism was deserved for those who were giving it to because they made mistakes. Criticism has to be given to those who made mistakes, but at the same time, we also have to move on and learn from it. I think that's the best.
No, you're right, and I think Eddie will do that. As what I was saying there, I think he is the type of manager that will learn from these mistakes. But I think we started writing some more pieces for our website. If the guys want to go check it out, it's on our X bio there. You'll be able to see the links to the articles. But there's whichever way Dan's pointing. I never point because I'm always like like that.
No, I got it right. Don't worry.
I'm like pointing at the window or something. I should be pointing at the door. But going back to some of the players in there now, Miggy's had a lot of stick in the game. I know some people are saying, listen, he's had two efforts. One is it's a wonder save by Alisson. I don't know how he saves it, mate.
Phenomenal.
I remember Schmeichel. Yeah, Schmeichel pulling off these saves, and we used to go, that's the best save I've ever seen. And I think that's probably up there with some of the best saves I've ever seen in the Premier League. It really is. But the problem is with Almiron is he has these moments, and I think I tried to describe him earlier on is he does this. He makes the simple things difficult, and then the difficult things he seems to be able to do when you don't expect him to do it. I don't think he expects to do it sometimes. And I think the issue that we have with Almiron is Almiron was brilliant last season, and we wouldn't be where we are without him. But if you look at the other areas where we've upgraded, there's been no sentiment there. Lewis Hall's coming in. Make no mistake about it, Dan. Lewis Hall ain't coming in to be a bench warmer. Lewis Hall's coming in to be the starting left back in this team, and rightly so, because we've shoehorned the centre half in there way too long. Sandro Tonali came in as an upgrade on Sean Longstaff, and that's exactly what he is, right? So you look at Miggy. For some reason, the club has not decided to upgrade on Miggy after last season. And you look at the players that were linked to us, and it might just be bad coincidence. And maybe Miggy will come good. I personally don't think he'll be as good as he was last season. I think that's the best season he'll ever have in his career. But you look at how good Moussa Diaby settled into Villa. How good does he look? Even Maddison at Spurs, even without Kane, how good does he look? And you think to yourself, we spent 30 million quid in a right back. could we not have dropped another 10 or 20 and got one of them to him and upgraded Miggy's position? That's what infuriates me. And Howe's going to have to take that and explain that, I think, to some fans. He really is.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think we've upgraded pretty much every other position on the field accordingly, apart from perhaps the centre half, where we still need a little bit of cover. But in goal, you've got three. You've got Dubravka, Karius in behind Pope. Right back, you've got Trippier, you've got Livramento. That's fine. Even left back, I know obviously Dan Burn's been shoehorned in there for a good while now, but you've got Lewis Hall. You've also got Matt Target, despite his mistake yesterday. So you've got three there who can play there. And then in the midfield, your central midfield, you're pretty much stacked. You've got Tonali, you've got Joe Linton, you've got Bruno, you've got Longstaff. Willock is who I believe we're actually missing more than perhaps people have realised. Because he was phenomenal last season, and his pace and driving from the midfield last season is something that really helped Newcastle in key situations.
Would Willock have made a difference on Sunday?
I think so, yes, because I think
you would have done.
Because, I mean, I know Bruno has those moments where he can drive forward a little bit and beat a man, and Joe Linton sort of similarly can do that, and then Tonali obviously is sort of a ball winner, play the ball on quickly, but no one has the pace and dynamism of Joe Willock, and especially when Liverpool have a midfield that doesn't have a lot of defensiveness in it. It's all very quite attacking. McAllister, Szoboszlai, they're not really known for their defensive capabilities. You got someone like Joe Willock with that sort of pace running at you, that's going to cause problems. He creates chances, Joe Willock. He's always in and about there. His pace, his intensity is always something that really helps Newcastle. So I think his legs yesterday could have actually changed things. I know, obviously, we're all saying this in hindsight, and realistically, Newcastle should have won that game anyway because of the chances they had and didn't take. But Joe Willock is someone who I think they missed. But just to go back to where I was at, as I said, the midfield stacked. Up front, you've got Isak and Wilson. That's probably enough for now. On the left, you've got Gordon and Barnes. That's fine. Then on the right, you've got Almiron and you've got Murphy. Now, Murphy, I remember many moons ago on this podcast, I've been a big fan of Jacob Murphy for a long time.
Even before he was juicy.
Before it was cool. Before it was cool to like Jacob Murphy. Yeah. Because now he's just, he's just a meme king, isn't he? But that's perhaps where it's lacking a little bit. The sort of the end product from those two, because they're both really hard workers. They'll run for days, with and cover the ground that Eddie Howe wants them to cover, and do their defensive duties as well.
That's the question from Vincent there, Dan. That's the big question.
It's a good question, and if you do, you've then got to work out who goes where. Isak's probably
Gordon right, Barnes left.
Yeah, and it's just whether can Gordon play.
I think he could. I think Gordon can play anywhere across that front three. I wouldn't want to put pressure on him and be a centre forward because he's not a centre forward. But
in fairness to that, he did really well for England at the Euros, playing through the middle as well.
I'll give you that. But his natural ability to pull players wide. I mean, he tortured Alexander-Arnold.
He was fantastic. Gordon was.
He was electric, mate. The speed. Do you know what he reminded me of? He reminded me of. This might sound really hyperbolic, but he reminded me of the kind of wingers you used to see with Ryan Giggs and Robert Perez and Overmars at Arsenal. Just that absolute pace, just getting away from somebody. That's what he reminded me of.
It's not like the sort of St. Maximin, like using skill to beat your man. It's very much an old-fashioned drop of the shoulder, pace, get to the byline, or cut inside sort of thing, take a shot or get your cross in. Whereas obviously St. Maximin was different. He'd use sort of the tricks and everything, the flicks to get the better of his man, which on occasions did work. But Gordon's very much sort of an old-fashioned winger in that sense, as if, drops the shoulder just, or a one step over sort of thing, uses that electric pace, gets past his man, get crossing, get shot away, whatever it is. So yeah, if he can play on the right, play on the right, because I think if you look at Almiron, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because yesterday, on another day, he had have scored 2 goals. He was desperately unlucky with the Alisson save.
Yeah, he's man of the match, isn't he? He scores them 2 goals. He's man of the match.
He's desperately unlucky with the Alisson save. He couldn't have caught that any better. In fairness to Almiron, that's going in the top corner if it's not for a fantastic save from Alisson. And then obviously the run, to be fair, that would have been a fantastic goal as well, when he's just left, I think it was McAllister, for absolute dust in the middle. And he's, driven into the area. He shot, perhaps he's rushed it a little bit because the goal was sort of gaping for him. Alisson's is a little bit off his line, just has to get that curl into the bottom right hand corner, and obviously he tries it and it hits the post. It is very unlucky, in fairness to him. But there's the other ones where
he skies one. That one he skies that.
Yeah, he had.
I mean, you could have scored that, mate. I mean, what was he doing?
It's more annoying because he had time to take it down and to just compose himself instead of lashing at it first time, leaning back and it going flying straight up into the rosette of the Gallagher's.
And obviously, you were at the game and I was watching on TV, so we have two different perspectives here. And even Gary Neville went, "Oh, don't lean back." That. It's like the frustration as a former player. It's just like, what are you doing? This is basic stuff, man.
That's the thing. Almiron sort of seems to do everything in a real hurry at times. And I know, and to be fair, that when pace is needed, because pace is one of the key factors in the modern game of football. Pace is everything. Anthony Gordon proves that. However, in that situation, he had time. He had at least a couple of seconds to compose himself with just one touch and then pick his spot in the goal. He didn't do that. He lashed at it, and then you don't take the opportunity. So, yeah, it's moments like that where Almiron sort of is lacking in his end product as well, and obviously his inability to use his right foot as well, which can be quite frustrating at times when he's
right foot.
Well, it's just something to stand on, isn't it, for balance?
He's like a flamingo. He's only got one fucking leg, and to be fair.
Yeah, it's just there for balance.
Just this comment on Ian. I thought I'd put it, but we'll come on to that maybe in the transfer talk. But a bit interesting that that he's saying that Eddie wanted Maddison and Diaby. That we'll get onto that in the transfer talk. I do wonder if there's a bit of Ashworth over Eddie going on here in the transfers when you look at some of these transfers. But we'll come back to that in a minute, mate. But just a question for you, Dan. You were at the game, and when you're at the game, you do see things differently than you do when you're on TV because the cameras will follow the play, they'll follow the action. They don't necessarily follow a player's positional sense or the runs that he tracks, or where he's talking to his teammates. In your opinion, as somebody who was at the game, how did Bruno play in this game? Because he's getting a bit of heat about coming out the side and not being very good. He obviously makes the mistake with whatever that pass was for the winning goal. I mean, it's not just him, his defence woeful, Target and Burn, which we'll come on in a second. Yeah. But how did Bruno play for you in the game?
I think it was probably his best game of the season of the three.
Even the Villa game?
I think he was sort of the quietest of the midfield three in that Villa game, to be fair. I thought Tonali and Joe Linton were better than him. Man City, he was just a passenger last week against them.
A lot of people were, yeah.
Yeah, I criticised him quite rightfully, in my opinion. Yeah, I think it was his best game of the three we've had so far this season. He got on the ball more. He sort of had that moment where he just quickly just sprint past his man with the ball and create the space and whatnot. And he did play some good passes as well, but at the same time, he still wasn't quite the levels that we've seen of him before. And it's a difficult one with Bruno. I don't know whether you take him out the side because that would probably mean bringing Longstaff in, and I don't think, as we've said, he's fit yet.
Well, there's a point that there's an article coming out on our site again tomorrow, which I scribbled, and it was actually inspired by one of the viewers. I can't remember exactly who it was. It might have even been Ian Brownlee in the comments there about where's Louis Miley, and I personally think Louis Miley could be that player you bring on when Bruno's head's starting to go a bit, when he's starting to make stupid passes, he's starting to misjudge. He can hold the ball a bit, can't he? Yeah.
He's more technically gifted, say, than a Sean Longstaff, for example.
Definitely, 100%.
Longstaff is more of a workhorse and an engine, sort of that Jordan Henderson type. Not massively technically gifted, but will be everywhere for you on a football pitch when you need him to be. Miley's perhaps, as I say, is more Bruno type, as in will get on the ball, look for passes, etc., create the space, whatnot. But yeah, it's an interesting one because as you said before we came on, he's not been in the matchday squad at all this season, which is a bit of a surprise given how good he was in pre-season.
I don't get it.
I mean, obviously you've got Elliot Anderson as well, who you could possibly put in that role in the middle, and obviously he had a fantastic pre-season, especially the games in America. So you could look to that alternative. I wouldn't necessarily say we need to rush to drop Bruno. I do think he needs to realise, how there's sort of responsibility on him a little bit and instead of spitting the W out on social media.
Yeah, that wasn't a good move. Yeah, what was it?
And sort of like needs to have a bit more responsibility on himself, because as much as he's entitled to hit back, if you can't take criticism, then that's not a good look, sort of thing.
Yeah. Just a point on the midfield, and it kind of dovetails as well into the next category, which obviously is all about the last couple of games, I think, because it's highlighted where there is areas of issue in the squad. This number 6 is something that we've all been talking about, even through last season, as well as none of our midfielders seems to have this ownership or ability to play in the 6, even though apparently Bruno and Tonali can both play as a 6. They're both playing together. As Stu says, that's quite worrying if we're going to talk about it all season. But in terms of holes in the squad, and again, I can bring Miley into this equation as well, Dan, because he's such a young player, and the way he uses the ball, dare I say, in a Carrick-esque manner. Now, Carrick did play at the base of that midfield for a long time. Obviously at Spurs, and certainly excelled at Manchester United. Between Tonali and Bruno, none of them seem to be willing to drop into the 6. They're both pushing on, trying to, be the 8, and then they're leaving that 6 position blank. Should one of those, there's 2 questions, I suppose, mate, get into that. Should one of those have it in them and go, right, I'll stop and you go, and then vice versa, I'll drop and you go? And also, do you think Miley could be almost coached in to be that 6 and use that ball as well as he uses it and just sit and patrol in front of the back four?
It's sort of what John Joe Shelby used to be back when he was at Newcastle. I know obviously he's a
quarterback style player.
Yeah, exactly. Very much so. Sort of like Shelby. I'm not like saying like let's go and bring John Joe Shelby back, because his day is well and truly gone. But when Shelby,
I've got more legs than John Joe these days, Dan.
But in fairness to John Joe Shelby, on his good days, there was no one better in that role, because he was really, really good at it. He'd always come short for the ball from, say, the centre half or the goalkeeper, turn and then look to either drive and then spray the passes. That's what Shelby was always really good at. And obviously you've sort of got Bruno trying to do that to an extent, and he is good at it when he wants to be. Tonali, I'd say Bruno's probably more technically gifted than Tonali, because Tonali is more sort of a ball winner and then can drive forward a little bit as well. His range of passing isn't perhaps as good as Bruno's, so to speak. But yeah, they're sort of trying to do similar things a little bit on. They sort of, play that quarterback busy bee like around like the midfield, just in front
almost
of the
getting in each other's way type of thing, making the
and
same run. Yeah.
And then you've got Joe Linton, who of course is again sort of very box to box, will win you the ball and drive forward as well. So they're all, in a sense, they have similar sort of attributes. Obviously, others are better at some things than the other ones, but they are sort of all similar in that way a little bit. And I think this brings us back to Joe Willock again as well, and Lewis Miley as well.
Yeah, it was Ian that said that. I thought it was Ian. Yeah, good shout, mate. Thanks for letting us know. It was Ian that said it on the post match. It was all manic. There was about 50 comments before I even logged on.
The only thing I'd say about Lewis Miley is it's a lot of responsibility on a 17-year-old shoulders.
But if you're good enough, you're old enough.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not exactly.
We've seen it before, mate. I mean, look at Phil Foden, mate. Phil Foden came in that Manchester City setup, and he was fucking outstanding. Even before he could shave, practically he was playing. I know
City can't play anything with kids. Honestly, where is exactly these days?
But this is my point. Louis Miley, as Ian rightly says, was the best player in pre-season outside of Elliot Anderson, in my opinion, right? And we've started this season. I'm not having to go at Howe, right? But we started the season like a house on fire against Villa. Nobody's asking any questions. Man City weren't great, right? In terms of Man City, their performance levels, they were way off it. Had we been a bit more clinical, had a bit more energy earlier on in the game,
we possibly
might have had a chance to nick a draw. Yeah. And yesterday, if we're looking at the bench going, right, who can we bring on? Bruno's losing it a little bit. His passes are going wayward. He's a bit all over the gaff or whatever. Right, we'll bring him off. We'll bring on Louis Miley and we'll just say, just keep it simple. Louis, do what you do. Knock the ball around. Get your foot on it. Slow it down a bit. Make Liverpool work for it. And the kid can do that. Even at 17, he can do that. Whereas Bruno's quite an emotional lad, and he's running around, he's trying to do.
And I think sometimes that gets the better of him a little bit.
I think so. Yeah, that's a weakness for Bruno. I think it's a strength and a weakness.
Needs to control his emotions a little bit on the pitch. I think you're right there, Chris. obviously, if Lewis Miley can be that sort of composed and can't think ahead for even just the last 10 minutes of a game, then so be it. Stick him in. Elliot Anderson, of course, you think of him. Can he do that sort of similar role? Because
I would put Elliot in the Miggy role. That's what I'd do with Elliot.
Yeah, you could obviously, because Anderson's perhaps more of a beat your man type of midfielder, whereas Miley's more of a spray the pass sort of,
100%.
Yeah,
two different players in my opinion. One's further forward, one sits.
Yeah, Anderson's more an advanced player up the pitch, as in he's more of a goal threat, so to speak, than Lewis Miley would be, because he can beat his man and probably get a shot away. And we saw that in pre-season with the goals he scored. It's then you obviously got to think of then how does Sean Longstaff come into the situation, and then that's a tricky one because he's not really looked very good this season so far. Obviously coming back from injury, so perhaps that's still affected him a little bit. Obviously, we know how badly affected he was by the last big injury he had and how long it took him to sort of find his feet again after that. And obviously losing his place to Tonali on the side is not going to do any wonders for his confidence either.
No.
So again, it just comes back to those substitutions, though, doesn't it? A little bit. Gordon probably should
took the sting out of the game. Took the sting out of the game. I think Tonali could have went off, and if Tonali had went off, Bruno might have stepped in and took maybe over what he was doing. But to take Gordon off took all the zip out of the game. It just went flat when Gordon went off, in my opinion.
Gordon was our threat yesterday. There's no denying.
Yeah, he was.
He was the key threat. And taking him off was a mistake. I know perhaps he was knackered, but even a knackered Anthony Gordon is probably more of a threat than perhaps what came on to replace. Well, obviously I know it was Harvey Barnes, but it just went stick, because Barnes, as much as he's a good player, hasn't got the pace and the electricness of Gordon. And I mean, Gordon deserves all the praise he's getting, because Gordon's had a fantastic start of the season. Bit off it at Man City. Started okay in that game, but against Villa and Liverpool, he's been absolutely nothing short of phenomenal. He's been Newcastle's player of the 3 games so far, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a shame.
He's been electric, mate. He has. He's been super.
Yeah, he's given the fullbacks absolute nightmares.
He looks a bargain for 40 million quid as well, doesn't he?
It's
look
really
at the transfer fees for people now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when he first came in January, he was a bit off the pace, but that's to be expected because he'd come from Everton, who didn't have the same intensity levels and fitness levels that they do at Newcastle, and he's played in a team where he was devoid of confidence because, of course, Everton weren't playing well at all. And then he's come to this Newcastle side who were already doing really well. I think he said this in the documentary, didn't he? Like, everyone knew their roles already, and he's come into this trying to find his feet in it. It was tricky for him at the start, and he perhaps looked a bit out of place. But he went away to the Euros, the Under-21 Euros, had that phenomenal summer, winning player of the tournament there. That's put his confidence sky high. And then he's come back into this Newcastle side, raring to go, fully fit. And he's started the season brilliantly. He's got his goal against Liverpool. And he just looks a constant threat and someone who's probably undroppable at the moment. Yeah. But it's just, why was he taken off then? If that having said all that, why was he taken off?
Well, that is the question. I mean, the only thing it possibly is, it would protect them for the next game at Brighton, and he's maybe Eddie's thinking, I don't want him to do himself in, because he chases every ball, and he even said, didn't he, in the Amazon documentary, with it being at home, it makes you want to run that bit harder for those fans, and maybe Howe was just worried about him burning himself out. But I mean, Harvey Barnes has looked sharp in his appearances, but I think he made a couple of bad judgment calls in the game. Certainly the ball to Wilson. There was almost a carbon copy of the Villa goal. He should have squared that, and I think Wilson tucks that away if he does. Wilson was going crazy at him, and rightly so. And I think Barnes is I don't want to say he's getting frustrated too early, but I mean, to be fair to Harvey Barnes, he's probably looking on the sideline. He's probably watching Miggy make simple mistakes, and he's probably thinking, fucking, I'd have done that, or I'd have sorted that, I'd have cut that back. He's probably getting a little bit wound up. So when he's getting his chance, he's coming on. He's maybe thinking, right, I'm going to take a shot, or I'm going to show the manager I need to be in the team.
On the contrary, I actually think he should have shot there, but he should have shot a lot earlier than he tried. I think he was.
He hesitated. He was in two minds, wasn't he? Do I pass it? Do I shoot?
That's the problem. Yeah. He was caught in two minds. He didn't know what he wanted to do with himself, whether he was going to square it, whether he was going to shoot. In my opinion, he should have taken the shot nice and early, put it past Alisson. But regardless, if he squares it, he squares it, and then Wilson puts the ball in, or if he shoots it, he finds the bottom corner. Regardless, but he just have to make up his mind a lot quicker than he did, because by the time he decided to do anything with it, there was 2 defenders covering off Wilson, so he couldn't really square that ball. Well, one covering off Wilson and then one coming to him, so his shots just affected and it just, rolls into Alisson's hands. So, yeah, whatever he was going to do in that situation just had to be done an awful lot quicker. I think that was the issue there. He was caught in 2 minds.
No problem. Good night, Les. Have a good one, whatever you're doing. Yeah, thanks for joining in. Just a comment here from Stu. Just I might be able to answer this, Stu. Probably just exactly what we've just been talking about. So he wasn't happy with that.
He's on Stu's profile picture there. That's
what's that? Sorry, mate.
Is that Federico Fernandez on that profile picture I'm looking at?
I don't know, mate. Your eyes are better than mine, mate. Your eyes are certainly better than mine. He might tell you in a minute. But he's just saying he wasn't happy with Eddie's comments about the lack of space against 10 men. Most teams would sit deep against us at home. How are we going to unlock those defences with our current forwards? Well, I tell you one way we might unlock it, Shaju, is if we have a kid who can use the ball really well on the bench that we can bring on Cordley. We might need to be honest.
Possibly be talking about, Chris.
Who could I possibly be talking about? Now, it sounds like I'm putting loads of pressure on this kid, and in a way I am. But listen, when you see a player who's got something, right? And this again, you'll think I'm being hysterical, right? But I remember looking back, and again, sadly I'm older than you, Dan. I remember looking back, Steven Gerrard when he come through at Liverpool, David Beckham at Manchester United. These kind of players that they come through the youth academy, they just got something about them, and you think, hang on a minute, they don't all explode like Wayne Rooney scoring and screaming like he does because he's a striker. But the midfielders, you go, oh, hang on a minute. He's got something. There's just something about the way he uses that ball, or something about the way he positions himself. That even at 17, you can't really teach that. It's a natural thing that you've got. And Louis Miley showed that. And even out of all of these brilliant midfielders that are around him, because they are, Bruno, Tonali, Joe Linton, Willock, Longstaff was excellent last season, right? They're all good players. But this kid has something that none of those players seem to display. Just this ability to slow the play down and use the ball in the right way. And even at 17, I think that's a key asset to have off the bench. And I don't understand why on earth Eddie Howe would be playing fucking Matt Ritchie on the bench over this kid. What's Matt Ritchie going to do again? I mean, I know it was against Villa and we'll batter them 5-1. It's irrelevant, right? But even on the bench on Sunday, you've got 2 fullbacks. You've got Matt Targett and Livramento on the bench. And you've got nobody else that can come on and do anywhere near what Bruno does. You should have said there, Longstaff's a different player altogether. So what's the point of not having a kid on the bench? I don't get it. I don't understand it. Why do you need 2 fullbacks? I don't get that.
Yeah, it's a good point because, of course, unless of a sort of a freak scenario where you lose both of your fullbacks in one game, it's not something that you're gonna. I mean, Trippier can play left back or right back, I think, is the sort of ethos. You probably only need one to cover, because if say your left back goes off, it was
very good eyes, Dan.
So Trippier can go then across the left back. He's played there, for England on the highest level. And then you could put Livramento right back. It's quite simple, because I sort of feel bad for Matt Targett, because he was brilliant that season when he came in at left back. He did really, really well. And then came out with injury a little bit towards the start of last season, and then never really found his feet again. Sort of his confidence, because quite evidently completely dipped, and he's really looking a shadow of the player he once was. But yeah, then you sort of think, well, why are they both in if you can sort of go without, and then you could possibly put a more creative or more goal-scoring threat player on the pitch, or someone who's going to create something that will lead to a goal-scoring threat. Yes, you've got Elliot Anderson. There you go. But Harvey Barnes, goal-score threat, fair enough. Wilson, threat. And then you could have Lewis Miley, who's a much more creative option as well. Obviously, Murphy, again, does a bit of everything. So Murphy's a versatile player. He can sort of...
And he's really kicked on, Murphy. I think his final distribution, I would actually argue, his final distribution in terms of passing is getting better than Miggy's. To be honest with you, more consistent than Miggy's, I would say.
He's put a lot of good balls into the box when he's played, has Jacob Murphy. You could even make a case for him starting over Almore and then Gordon on the other side. If you weren't wanting to play Gordon on the right and put Barnes on the left, if you thought Gordon was only going to go left or through the middle, you could even make a case for Jacob Murphy starting. And he did on a number of occasions last season. And look at Tottenham, look at Manchester United. He played in both of those games, and look how they turned out. And
True.
Murphy, as I say, I think is a very versatile player and will play anywhere for you. So yeah, it's all. I think we're just sort of getting a bit caught and lost and just the misery of yesterday, Chris. To be honest, I think
Yeah,
it's
I think just the last couple of games we're not really used to getting beaten the manner that we did at the weekend. I think it's still a bit sore with a lot of people, us too, most definitely. But I think going back to the holes in the squad, because of the FFP restrictions, which will come on to transfers in a minute, I don't think the club are going to go and buy anybody for a serious outlay of money. Obviously, unless something happened to Botman. But according to Craig Hope, the injury isn't as bad as the
yeah,
first thought. So maybe Botman isn't going to be injured, which thank God for that, because that would have been an absolute disaster. But I do think against Brighton, a couple of guys have already said that in the comments. I think Lewis Hall, to me, I think gets straight into the team. Whether Botman's fit or not. If Botman's not fit, Byrne steps inside the centre half.
yeah.
And I hope he plays a lot better than he did in that weird offside trap movement that he did the weekend. Hopefully he will. But I think even having a player like Lewis Hall over there, again, I'm waxing about teenagers again, Will, in the comments. I just think they're both really good players. But with Lewis Hall, from what I saw of him at Chelsea, he looks every inch the modern day fullback in terms of wing back, in terms of getting forward, being able to get back. I think defensively he does have some little ricks in him, but he's only 18, so you're bound to have that. But going forward, he's so good on the ball, pace, and the amount of crosses he whipped in for Chelsea that their attackers were nowhere near. He showed you his potential. That's why Eddie Howe wanted to sign him. Now, for me, in a game like Brighton, I would put Lewis Hall in there because Brighton are very front-footed, very quick. They play through the lines, and I think you need somebody with a bit of pace that can recover. And I think if we had Byrne at left back, he may struggle. So I think Lewis Hall will get a chance. I hope he gets a chance anyway. And certainly if Botman's carrying any kind of a knockdown, you would probably think Lewis Hall will get his start against Brighton, wouldn't you?
I mean, obviously West Ham did a job on Brighton, though, didn't they? So it can be done.
Sure, it can be
Quite,
done.
quite, quite
West Ham are playing brilliant. Do you know what it is with West Ham, Dan? I think one player's pulled that together, and that's James Ward-Prowse. I think we talked about him on Rumour Hazards. I think he's a much better player than people give him credit for, saying he's just good at free kicks and corners. He's way more than that.
I watched that game. Brighton battered West Ham for the majority, had all the ball, but very much in a Newcastle sense, we're not clinical enough for Brighton. Whereas West Ham had a couple of counter attacks and scored from them, and that's exactly how they won the game. So yeah, it's if we can. I'm not saying that we have to take the same approach because we're perhaps a better team overall than West Ham, but we could. I'm not saying we can't go there and get anything.
No, we should do. I mean, Jodie's saying there maybe Hall isn't match fit. I mean, we saw little clips of him in training, didn't we? To be fair, maybe if he doesn't get a start, Jodie, he might get a start. He might get 45 minutes or something, or an hour maybe, and then maybe he'll get hooked after that. But I'm excited to see how well Hall fits into this setup, because I think we can become a bit too one-dimensional with everything going down that right-hand side. Funnily enough, it was the other way on Sunday. Everything went down the left-hand side because Gordon was so good. And because Trent was booked so early, it was tactical, I think, from Eddie Howe and Tyndall to say, get down that side, get down that side. I mean, just before, I suppose we'll move on to some of the transfers, Dan, I pulled this up post-match. It's worth seeing it again, if you can see that. So just the summary, really, of where it's going wrong for us is this was the game. So we had 60% possession versus Liverpool's 40. We had 23 shots versus their 9. We only had 8 of those 23 on target versus their 4 of the 9 on target. We had 11 shots off target and they had 3 shots off target. That probably shows you in a nutshell what the problem was on Sunday. We just weren't taking our chances and we weren't clinical enough, really, Dan, were we, in a nutshell for Sunday?
No, just not clinical enough. I think that's the main upshot of the game, to be honest. It happened a lot at times last season as well when we sort of couldn't score in sort of that lull that we had around the cup final. Like, it was sort of like we couldn't buy a goal at times despite all the attacking talent we had on the pitch, and it seemed like apart from the goal we scored, it seemed a little bit like that yesterday, to be honest. And that's the difference, in my opinion, because Man City didn't have an awful lot of chances last week, but the one that they did have, the real good one, they scored. Liverpool had 2 chances last week. They scored them both.
Yeah, but that's what makes them a top side, really.
Exactly,
I mean, they had a bad season last season, but they are still a very good side, aren't they? To be fair, you've got to
that's the
remember that.
difference. That's the thing. You got to think. Well, Nunes came on and obviously had those 2 chances since he came on, but then Isak, sort of as good as he is, didn't really have much of a sniff yesterday. Now, is that his fault or is that the supply coming into him? Like, it's a really tricky one because Isak's a phenomenal footballer, in my opinion, probably the most gifted footballer at the club. But he just, as I say, he just hasn't had the service. And as I say, I'm not sure what that comes down to. Because against Villa, it's exactly the same role, exactly the same team, exactly the same formation. And he scores 2 in that game. And then yet he's just sort of looked a little bit quiet in the last 2. So you got to think, well, how does that work? It's all very tricky. And of course, that all comes down to Eddie Howe and his coaching team to work out how to get the best out of them. But I think at the end of the day, they just need to be scoring more goals, and no matter how they figure that out,
yeah, the mighty wins backing you up there. Really, just saying we had the highest negative XG in the league last season, and we should have scored 17 more goals than we did. So it does show you that this being wasteful thing isn't a new thing. William's just saying what teams want to run with us, we usually kill them. They're learning to slow the game down. I do agree with that, and we struggle. We'll see this model a ton until we figure it out. I do think we need a bit of a plan B, William. I think you're totally right, but I'm sure we'll be talking about that in a few more episodes to come. Just moving on to the transfer in it, Dan. It is closing, and we've had a couple of outgoings. So we've had some of the, if you want to call them the dead wood or the reserves, what do you want to call them? But obviously Ryan Fraser has gone to Southampton. He had a couple of things to say. Didn't get into too much, just dropped a little bit in there. Isaac Hayden went a lot more quietly. I think he's gone to Luton on loan, which I think is a good sign for Luton. I think that they'll give him a bit of an enforcer to maybe
sort of like very much when we came up from the Championship the last time. Sort of,
yes,
they need that type of player who can just, not massively, brilliant on the ball, but can just get about the pitch and put tackles in. I mean, Hayden was often a bit like Jack Colback, a bit of a walking needless foul or a walking yellow card, but at times...
But he did it with style, though, Dan, didn't he? He lifted somebody 4 foot in the air when he went through the tackle.
He did, yeah.
He made sure.
But when you're coming up and you're sort of like just trying to when you haven't got an awful lot of quality in your team, as Luton probably don't, given the displays they've put on so far, you just need a little bit of that in the middle of the park just to sort of ruffle teams up a little bit and just get in amongst them, because that's how you can win games at times when you're sort of competing against the bigger teams, which Luton are going to have to do this season. It's how we did it as well.
I think with Ryan Fraser as well, it's a funny one. I mean, he seems like a nice bloke and that, but he had trouble at Bournemouth, and that didn't end very well for him. He's had a bit of bother here by the looks of it. You start to question the lad's character a little bit, but I always refer to him as the ghost because he disappeared years ago here. He had little moments with Eddie, I think, last season, but by and large, he's been a pretty shit signing for Newcastle. I'm not really sad to see him go.
He had a bit of a run in the team towards the end of 2021-22, didn't he? When he was actually looking okay, and he scored a couple of goals.
Then he got injured again.
Yeah. As I say, when he scored, he was sort of like the shoe in on one of the wings, and then he got injured, and then he never really made his mark again, did he? And then of course, this falling out's come, and then we've never seen the off from a couple of quarters.
Marcus has gone in like an Isaac Hayden challenge there. Never liked Fraser, little shit.
So here's me trying to be diplomatic and sort of nice about things, and then
got no room for that. What's going on? Come on,
Marcus over here just gone with 2 feet, stood showing, and then he just
straight red. Virgil van Dijk, mate. Yeah, absolutely. But I think So those guys have gone out. I mean, there's obviously been talk about. I think is Jamal Lascelles as well. There's been talk about him leaving the club. There's been some other talk about him tonight, which we won't talk about because nobody knows whether that's true or not. But there was talk about, I think, interest in Turkey for Jamal Lascelles. Was it Mankiw as well? I think somebody's interested in Mankiw.
Mankiw will probably be going. Yeah, I mean,
I'd be surprised. We've got about 9 right backs now. We
don't because I think they'll keep Emil Kraft just because of how good he performed in the time when Trippier was injured towards the back end of 2021-22. He's sort of like maybe the third choice, but you need cover in those positions as well. So you got Livramento, who's probably understudy to Trippier, but then if either were to get injured, then you've got Kraft as a replacement. Obviously, when he comes back from that hideous injury he picked up with Tranmere last season, because that was horrendous.
It was a bad one. Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
But yeah.
Anyone else coming in? Do you think, Dan? Anyone else coming in?
As I say, I think it depends on the bottom one, but of course, from what we can, as you said, doesn't seem to be as serious as perhaps first feared. Might be out for a couple of games, but even that might, sort of like make them have a little look into the market. So who knows? I think that's sort of the key position they need to look at, isn't it? It's sort of the centre half. And I don't think they would let Lascelles go unless they had someone else lined up as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's a lot of players linked. I think Craig Hope did a piece in about 4 or 5 centre halves, and one of them in there, I think I did a video on him and waxed lyrically about him, which is Antonio Silva from Benfica, who's an unbelievable player. Looks very much like the Botman mould, but he's right-footed. And you very much see him as a replacement for Shaw long term as well. And I'd love him at the club. I'd absolutely love him at the club. But I'm not sure whether the club will drop. I think Benfica wants 60 million for him. I think,
which is probably quite a lot considering what we've already spent this summer.
I can't see it, but again, it makes me wonder. Going back to the point we were making earlier, I don't understand why we signed a right back for 30 million quid when we needed a number 6. We maybe needed another right-sided centre half. We could have got an upgrade on Miggy. Why did we go and drop 30 million quid on Livramento? Now, this goes back to that point I think made earlier on by one of the viewers. Apologies, I can't remember who it was. But, you look at Livramento and say Barnes, right? Are they Ashworth signings and not Eddie Howe signings? And if that is the case, not to sound too hysterical, but there could be a little bit of a rift going on there then. Because
it depends. The chief scout is Steve Nixon, and he gets like a lot of the ones as well. So like,
you'd have to think he's involved. But I can't see those two players being bought for 60 million quid and Eddie Howe not wanting to use it. That's Kevin Keegan territory all over again, isn't it?
I think Livramento and Hall are both sort of the future fullbacks for Newcastle. I think that's why they were bought.
Unless they know something we don't about Trippier. Maybe Trippier said to them, listen, I've got 1 season left in my max.
Well, that's the thing. Even you just don't know, was he 31, 32 now? So
32, be 32 this season.
So he, as much as we hate to say it, he hasn't got like loads of time left at that highest level. So eventually he's going to have to be replaced. And you've got to think, that's probably why they've got Ashby and Livramento when Trippier does go out, because once he's out, then you still need 2 replacements.
Then you've got cover. Yeah. Potentially. I mean, that if you look at it that way, that could very much be the plan. I mean, I'm really excited about Lewis Hall. I think out of all the left backs that we were linked with, I was a big fan of.
He did look good. Chelsea had a really bad year last year, but he was one of those shining little beacons, wasn't he?
He did. He stood up. But I think of all the ones that were linked, Tierney and him were the 2 I was excited the most about. Tierney because of the experience, but then the injury record worried me. Now you look at what Hall did in a short period of time. And these weren't against mugs either. He was doing this against Man United. He was doing it against Man City. He was doing it against Liverpool. In the 11 games that he played for Chelsea, he played against some real top teams, Newcastle United as well.
He was the best. He was Chelsea's
the best player on the pot.
He was Chelsea's best player against us last season when we beat them 1-0, which says a lot because obviously, as I say,
Trips is 33 this year, Sean said.
Yeah, so it's.
Yeah, he's no spring chicken, mate. But I'm not sure who we would be able to get in. I'd love a bit of creative transfers, as Darren Neal's called it. To be able to pull off a loan deal for like Chiesa from Juventus or something like that, with a right to buy in the January window, or something like that.
I get the feel that's not going to happen, Chris. Sorry to burst you over.
I just don't think it's going to happen, mate. Sadly, I don't think it's going to happen at all. But I think, attacking wise, midfield wise, and striker wise, we're probably kind of stuck with what we've got. But yeah, maybe you're right. Then maybe the last one that may come in may very well be that centre half.
I'm just reading some comments here, Chris, on the side. People are saying, Kieran Trippier's the weakling. That's delusion. No, he's not.
Well, I saw some of them going there. He's definitely not. Kieran Trippier's
not. No, if anything, if anyone's the weakling, and that's in that back four, it's Dan Burn.
It is Dan Burn, 100%.
It's Dan Burn.
I love Dan Burn. I love his attitude. I love his energy. His passion. He throws himself in front of everything. But he's a centre half shoehorned into left back, and he does get exposed. I mean, I was talking about it on Twitter, and somebody said, "Oh well, Gordon has to play there because he has to cover for Burn." And I said, "Could you imagine just picking your left winger and not worrying about him covering for your left back? Like, yeah, track back and help him, but not physically
that's the
cover for
thing.
him."
That's the thing. Like Gordon was having to come back an awful lot yesterday as well because of his pace. Having to cover off the pace that Liverpool had down that side as well because Burn can't handle it and he can't turn, very, very well.
Ian's saying there again about Ashworth and Howe, mate. Hopefully there isn't anything in that, to be fair. But it's I hope that's just your opinion there, Ian. I hope that's not actually what Howe was wanting, because
but we also have to
don't
remember,
imagine
I mean, everyone's saying, "Oh, buy this, buy that," but we also have to remember the wage structure is still what it
of
is,
course,
and it's
yeah. Well,
that's
Madison wanted more money, didn't he? That was what the story was. Madison wanted was it
exactly. And
165 grand?
as much as we are the richest club in the world in terms of how much money our owners have, you can't just go and break your wage structure straight away like that.
180, says JB.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and because Tottenham have had these commercial deals and have this revenue coming in for years now, given where they positioned are and have been for times in recent seasons, they can do that and just go and like outbid in terms of the way we could bid the money in terms of the outright fee for the player, but it's the wages that are the issue still at Newcastle in terms of going to get players, because we don't have that as high of an income as other clubs in that region.
Maybe a certain deal here
What are you
might
referring to there,
might
Chris?
change
What's
that.
that?
It might change that possibly. I just thought I would throw that one in there. But yeah, I think we are probably stuck with what we've got, but we need to make it work. We have played two of the best teams in the league generally over the last two games, and we have only lost them by fine margins. But it's the frustrations, I think, because it's the simple things that we haven't done right, and I feel like there is players within that squad that need freshened up and maybe have a little kick in the arse to say, listen, you can't just put in those performances. You need to up your game, or the next guy will take your shirt. And that's kind of where we want to be. But we'll come off transfers, Dan. We'll finish with our Toon, as we always do, because it is getting a little bit late and people will want their bed soon. So yeah, our Toon is obviously just the section. So, not Dan, because he's young and he'll be up bouncing off the walls. I'll be asleep soon, but Dan will still be up for a few more hours, I'm sure. But yeah, our Toon is where we talk about things that aren't Newcastle United related. And I thought there was only one place really to start with. With this one, Dan, and it is not anything to do with Jamal Lascelles or Central Station. No, it is this one right here. It is Pep Guardiola has reached 200 wins in an unbelievable amount of games, mate. 269 games for 200 Premier League wins. And look at the company that he's in. Sir Alex Ferguson, 322 games it took him to get to 200 wins. Jose Mourinho, 326. Arsene Wenger, 332. David Moyes, fair play, was up there, 511 games. But I mean, those three below Pep are considered as, arguably some of the best managers the Premier League has ever seen. And for him to have eclipsed them so quickly, mate, it's almost like he's the Lionel Messi of managers, isn't it, really, in terms of breaking stats?
Yeah, I mean, Pep guy, he's just sort of done everything, hasn't he? Now he's won everywhere. We can always like make those arguments in terms of, oh, he's never done it if like I'd say like a club with no money, and that is true. But you've also got to go into clubs and sort of make them your own a little bit, and he's done that all over, and that record just speaks for itself because they are obviously the Premier League sort of like standout managers for what they've achieved in the league, and to go and better all that is phenomenal. There's no other way of saying it.
Yeah, that's a great one by Kev. He'd love Pep at Newcastle one day. He's got the Bobby Robson links as well. Hey, you never know, Kev. I actually think, not to get any hate off Manchester City fans here, but I think they know this as well because Pep's got form for this. I think he'd be gone in 2 or 3 seasons. I think he'd be gone.
He does that, though, doesn't he? Often like sort of doesn't stay there for like he stayed at Man City for like a lot longer than he stayed at, I think, was it Bayern Munich? I think
Bayern, so. He was only there 3 years, I think. Then he was gone, wasn't he?
Yeah, but and then obviously Barcelona was there for like a good while, but yeah, he's been there quite a while. So is it sort of overdue? Maybe who knows?
Possibly, mate. Very, very possibly. It makes you wonder who they'd go for when he went. I hope to God they wouldn't go for Eddie Howe. I think I have heard some City fans say that as well, to be fair, which is a serious worry, mate. But we've got a good few seasons left, I think, of Pep Guardiola smashing every single record going, mate. But yeah, so just one more then, I think, to end on, Dan, for the out of Toon. There was a really nice story that caught me. Actually, I don't know if it's an old or new story, but it's about this fella here, and people probably think, as Conor McGregor would
I
say,
like this one.
Who the fuck is that guy? Yeah, but yeah. So this one, you can relate to this, Dan, being a journalist yourself. So this guy here went from being a fan to the most successful president in 8 years. So this guy is, excuse my pronunciation, Tiago Reek, I believe he's called, a journalist, and he was once the only fan in the stadium at a Santa Cruz match. And he's now the most successful club president for the last 8 years. In 2012, as you can see the picture there, Rec was the only supporter in attendance when Santa Cruz lost 4-1 to Gramero, and the club was in a state of crisis both on and off the field, but he was determined to turn things around. A few years later, he got a job at Santa Cruz as media relations officer, and he worked his way up the ranks, eventually becoming the president in 2018. And under his leadership, Santa Cruz has undergone a remarkable transformation, and the club won the state championship in 2020 and qualified for the Brazilian Cup for the first time in over 107 years. I mean, what an inspirational football story that is, mate. I had to throw that one up there for our Toon because I love that kind of stuff, mate.
It's nice it's a very nice sort of a feel-good story in which to end things this evening. After all the complaining and the misery and the sort of doom and gloom we've had on this episode, which obviously we had to address, we had to go through. But yeah, it's a nice one on which to end.
Absolutely, mate. It's a great one to end. And just some of the guys there saying, "What a legend!" Absolutely, 100%. But yeah, it's a good feel good one, mate. To end on, as you rightly say, buddy. So yeah, badass indeed. He certainly is, Marcus. He certainly is. So that's us done for this episode of What's Going On, guys. Sorry, it's been a little bit of a moany one, but I think after that game of the weekend, it was bound to happen. Hopefully, we'll be a lot more cheery going through the week. Looking forward to the Brighton game, which is going to be a really tough game for Eddie and the lads as well. I think Eddie will have a few questions thrown at him in the press conference, and I think he'll obviously field them as well as he always does, and hopefully the lads will get the job done on the weekend against Brighton. Certainly for Dan, so he can wind his mate Charlie up when we win, because I'm sure he'll be doing that straight away. But as I mentioned at the start, guys, if you like this kind of thing, smash a like, help the channel grow. If you consider subscribing, we're over 5,000 subscribers now. So yeah, come and join us. Loads of room for ever more. Loads of more content coming through the week. Keep an eye out for everything, guys. Until then, have a cracking evening, everyone, and we'll catch you later. Cheers now. Bye-bye.